The storm came like a curse, rolling across the Nevada plains with a vengeance that rattled the sky and churned the earth beneath 1,000 pounding hooves. Lightning split the heavens in ragged streaks, illuminating the silhouettes of Mustangs galloping through the sagebrush, free, wild, and terrified. Among them ran a mare, her coat the color of burnished copper, her mane whipping like flame. At her side, barely tall enough to clear the grasses, a foal struggled to match her strides, his thin legs wobbling with effort. Isla glanced at her son with a mixture of urgency and fierce tenderness. She slowed just enough to nudge him along with her muzzle, never letting him fall behind. Colt was too young to understand the full weight of the danger that chased them, but he felt it in her tension, in the air crackling with electricity, and in the primal fear that pulsed through the herd like a drumbeat. The herd veered toward the canyons, seeking shelter. Jagged rocks and gullies loomed through the downpour, but Isla pressed forward, leading the rear with Colt tucked close to her flank. She had birthed him beneath a harvest moon, alone and panting in the dust, whispering his name with her first breath after his. Now, just 6 weeks later, she could feel his heartbeat against hers, fast and uncertain. A blood-curdling cry pierced the rain. It wasn't thunder. Isla skidded to a halt. Instinct screamed in her ears. She shoved Colt behind a cluster of boulders slick with rain, shielding him with her body as her ears flicked toward the sound. A mountain lion. It was the season when hunger overrode caution. The scent of panic in the air had drawn more than just the storm. She turned, eyes scanning the terrain. There, at the ridge above them, low to the ground, eyes glowing gold even in the dim light, was the predator. Isla snorted, stamping the ground, calling out to the stallion up front, but the herd had surged too far ahead. It was only her now. Colt peered out from behind her, ears flattened in fear. He didn't yet know what the glinting eyes meant, only that his mother's posture had shifted. Her muscles tensed like bowstrings. Her breath came heavy and hot through her nostrils. The lion sprang. Isla reared, striking the air with her front hooves, catching it mid-leap. A tangle of snarls and whinnies exploded into the storm. The foal scrambled back, slipping on the wet stone, heart hammering like a hummingbird's wings. The two beasts crashed into the mud. Isla kicked with a ferocity born not of rage but of love. Her hooves found flesh, and the lion yowled in fury, retreating only to lunge again. Blood mingled with the rain, dark ribbons washing down her flank. But she did not back down. Not for a second. Her scream, sharp and raw, echoed across the canyon walls as she delivered a final jarring kick that sent the lion sprawling into the underbrush. It didn't return. She stood trembling, sides heaving, eyes still scanning the dark. And then she stumbled. Colt rushed to her, nuzzling her chest, whinnying softly, his voice high and panicked. She lowered her head to meet his eyes, and he saw something in them he'd never seen before. Finality. She pressed her nose against his neck, breathing him in, imprinting him one last time. Her legs gave way and she folded gently to the ground, her breath coming in shudders. Colt curled beside her, his tiny body pressed close, trying to warm her, fix her, stop the cold that crept into her eyes. But the warmth was leaving her fast, no matter how tightly he pressed. The rain lightened by morning, the sky bruised with fading storm clouds. Birds returned, singing low, sorrowful tunes in the gray light. The foal woke beside her stiffening body, a tremor running through him. He stood, unsure, the scent of her fading into something unfamiliar. Something wrong. He nosed her flank. She didn't rise. He neighed, louder this time, a cry that rippled into the emptiness like a broken prayer. No answer came. The herd was gone. So was she. He wandered a few paces, then turned back. Took another step. Turned again. Each moment he hoped she would stir. That this was some cruel test she would rise from and smile, nudge him along like she always did. But she didn't. When the sun rose higher, he knew he couldn't wait any longer. Hunger clawed at his belly. His legs felt like water beneath him. He took one last look at her, her body still, her mane tangled with wildflowers and rain. Then he turned and walked away. Each step felt like a betrayal. The wind picked up again, dry now, humming through the canyons. It carried dust and the faint scent of sage and something else too, change. As Colt moved forward, tiny clumps of earth clung to his hooves, and his shadow stretched longer with the sun. He didn't look back. But if he had, he might have noticed the dust swirling in strange patterns where his mother lay, as if the wind itself lingered, unwilling to let go. And far off, from a perch above, a raven took flight, watching the little foal who walked alone where no path had been carved. Yet, the sun rose hard and merciless over the high desert, bleaching the rocks bone-white and burning the air dry. Colt moved like a shadow stitched to the ground, his small body stiff with exhaustion, ribs beginning to show beneath a thinning coat. With each step, he left behind the only world he had known, the curve of his mother's body beside him, the rhythm of her breathing as they slept, the soft wicker that used to greet him each morning. Now there was only silence. His hooves cracked dry twigs as he wove between stunted junipers and brittle sagebrush. Once or twice, he lifted his head at the sound of distant hoofbeats, but each time, it was only the wind pretending to be something it wasn't. He kept walking. He didn't know where he was going, only that the need to move gnawed at him more fiercely than hunger. Buzzards began circling overhead. He didn't look up. By the third day alone, the desert began to close in on him. Waterholes were crusted over with algae or dried entirely, and the few patches of grass he found were bitter and sparse. His legs, once steady under his mother's guidance, now trembled with each downhill slope. Night fell like a curtain of ice, and when he lay down he curled into himself as though trying to become smaller, less visible, less real. Coyotes howled in the distance that night. He didn't sleep. By morning the landscape had changed. The flatlands gave way to crooked gullies and pale rock formations twisted like bones. The air was heavier here, shaded by canyon walls that rose jagged and indifferent around him. A stillness lingered in this place, old and watching. It made the hairs along his spine lift. He walked slower now. Scattered across the stone were the ghost signs of life, ancient hoofprints fossilized into dry clay, the sun-bleached skull of a long-dead steer, shattered wood beams half-swallowed by time. At one point he passed a fallen fence, splintered, rusting wire curled like snakes in the dirt. He didn't understand what it meant, only that it didn't belong to the desert. By dusk he found a crevice in the canyon wall and stumbled inside. The air smelled faintly of ash and something older, moss maybe, or dust that remembered fire. The ground was smooth, worn down by creatures long gone. On the walls, strange markings spiraled, etched horses and hunters, stars and rivers. Colt blinked at them, unable to comprehend their meaning, but he felt something stir. A pull faint but certain. He lay down beside the drawings, his body too weary to resist sleep. He dreamed of hooves and thunder, of eyes glowing in the dark and a voice, his mother's, calling his name from somewhere he couldn't reach. When he woke the wind was different. There was a scent in it, something unnatural. Sweet, salted, familiar somehow. He sniffed again, head lifting. No, not exactly. But close. There was warmth on the breeze now, mingled with the scent of damp earth and iron. Colt stood, shaky but determined, and followed it. He climbed out of the canyon and wandered through an open plain riddled with weeds and yellow wildflowers. The air grew heavier with each step, and soon he saw the first signs, hoofprints in the dirt, fresh. And beside them, deep ruts left by something unnatural. Wheels. The trail led him to a broken gate hanging crooked on a rusted hinge. Beyond it, the remnants of a ranch slouched into the landscape like forgotten memories. A barn with half its roof caved in. A windmill that creaked though the breeze barely touched it. And a pasture, overgrown but still fenced in some places, holding long grasses and wild patches of clover. Colt froze. Movement flickered behind the barn. He crept forward, ears pricked, heart thudding like a war drum. Then a snort. Oh, warning. A shape stepped out into the open, larger than him by several hands, heavy in the chest, with a shaggy dark mane and eyes like frostbitten iron. The horse stared at him, unmoving. Colt took a step forward. The horse didn't blink. Another shape emerged behind him. Then another. A cluster of horses, silent as ghosts, stood in the dim light of the fading sun. Not wild but not tame either. They bore the marks of both worlds, rope scars, cracked hooves, uneven teeth. Castaways. Colt stood at the edge of the overgrown pasture, unsure. His legs told him to run, but something in their eyes held him there. Not kindness. Not yet. But curiosity. A question unspoken. The first horse stepped closer. A broad, old gelding with a white blaze down his face and a limp in his left foreleg. He sniffed Colt once, then huffed and turned away. It wasn't a welcome. But it wasn't rejection either. One by one the others followed, disappearing back behind the barn, leaving him alone in the clearing. The sun sank lower, brushing the edges of the world with crimson. Colt remained at the threshold, heart aching with a longing he couldn't name. He turned to leave. But just as his back hooves crossed the threshold of the gate, a whinny, sharp and commanding, rang through the dusk. He stopped. From the shadows a mare stepped forward. Older, her ribs visible beneath a dull bay coat. Her ears were pinned, her stare hard. She approached slowly, her head low, her gaze never leaving his. She came within inches of him, then circled once. Colt stood still. She sniffed his side, then his flank. Her breath was steady, but there was something unspoken beneath it. A memory, perhaps. Her muzzle brushed his shoulder. Then she turned and walked away without a sound, slipping through a narrow gap in the barn's wall. Colt stood there unsure. But inside him something pulled again. A whisper. So he followed. He stepped through the warped boards into the barn's shadows, and the door creaked closed behind him. The barn's interior was cloaked in shadows, the scent of old hay and rusted iron lingering in the air. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced through the weathered wooden slats. Colt stood motionless, his ears twitching at the faint creaks and distant murmurs that echoed within. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional rustle of unseen movement. From the darkness, a figure emerged, a mare with a coat the color of storm clouds and eyes that held the weight of countless seasons. She approached with measured steps, her gaze fixed on Colt. Without a word, she circled him, her breath warm against his flank. After a moment, she turned away, disappearing into the shadows. Colt hesitated, the urge to flee battling with a newfound curiosity. He took a tentative step forward, then another, following the mare's path deeper into the barn. The darkness enveloped him, but he pressed on, guided by the soft sounds ahead. As his eyes adjusted, he saw them, horses of various sizes and colors, their bodies bearing the marks of hardship. Some had scars, others limped, and a few bore the faded remnants of brands. They watched him with wary eyes, their expressions unreadable. The mare who had led him in stood at the center, her presence commanding. She nodded toward Colt, then turned to the others. A low murmur rippled through the group, a mixture of surprise and skepticism. One by one they stepped forward, sniffing and inspecting the newcomer. Some offered gentle nudges, others simply observed. Days turned into weeks. Colt learned the rhythms of this new life, the quiet camaraderie, the shared meals, the unspoken understanding among the herd. He discovered the stories etched into their bodies. The gelding with the limp had once pulled heavy loads until his legs gave out. The mare with the torn ear had escaped a fire that claimed her stable. Each carried a past, a burden, and yet they had found solace in each other. Colt began to change. His once thin frame filled out, muscles developing under the guidance of the older horses. He learned to navigate the terrain, to find water, to sense danger. The mare who had first approached him, whom he now knew as Mara, took a special interest in his growth, teaching him the ways of the wild and the importance of unity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the land, a distant sound reached their ears, the rumble of engines, the clatter of metal. The herd tensed, memories of past traumas surfacing. Mara stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She turned to Colt, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "It's time," she seemed to say without words. "We must move." The herd sprang into action, gathering their belongings and preparing to leave the safety of the barn. Colt felt a surge of anxiety but also a sense of purpose. He was no longer the lost foal of the canyon. He was part of something greater, a family forged not by blood, but by shared experiences and mutual care. As they set off into the night, the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind them, Colt glanced back at the barn one last time. It had been a sanctuary, a place of healing. Now it was time to face the world beyond, together. The night sky was thick with clouds, a swirling mass of gray that seemed to press down on the earth. The herd had stopped for the night, nestled in a quiet valley between the rocky ridges. The air felt heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. Mara stood at the edge of the group, her sharp eyes scanning the dark, her senses alert to every whisper of wind, every rustle of leaf, every movement of the earth beneath her hooves. Colt was at her side, more aware now of the dangers that lurked just beyond sight, but still clinging to the fragile sense of belonging the herd had given him. His body had grown stronger since those first days in the barn, his muscles now rippling with the strength of youth. Yet, something in the way the earth trembled beneath him, the vibrations deep in his bones, made him uneasy. It was as if the land itself was about to rupture, to cast everything into chaos. He stepped closer to Mara, seeking her steady presence, but she remained unmoving, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Mara," Colt murmured, his voice low with uncertainty. "What's happening?" Mara's ears flicked, her tail swishing nervously behind her. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned slowly, looking into his eyes with a mixture of caution and something else, something older, more primal. "The earth is speaking," she said quietly, her voice rough as if carrying the weight of ages. The ground is restless tonight, Colt. It trembles with the past, with the memory of things long buried. Colt felt a shiver run through him at her words. There were stories the older horses had shared, tales of lands that had once been lush and full, but had been torn apart by forces neither man nor beast could control. There were whispers of earthquakes, of fires that scorched everything in their path, of floods that swallowed the world whole. And now, it seemed, the earth itself was calling them to face something they couldn't escape. The herd was still, but the tension in the air was palpable, like the quiet before a storm. Mara stepped away from Colt, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the land once more. Then, with a final, almost imperceptible nod, she turned toward the others. "It's time," she said, her voice firm now. "We move." The horses shifted restlessly, the quiet broken by the sound of hooves scraping against the dry earth as they began to gather their strength. Colt hesitated, unsure of what was to come, but Mara's steady presence pulled him forward. The night felt suffocating, the weight of it pressing against him with every step they took. Yet, despite the unease gnawing at him, he knew there was no turning back. As they moved, the tremors underfoot grew more pronounced. The earth seemed to sway beneath them like a living thing trying to shake them loose. The wind picked up, howling through the canyon walls, and the scent of rain lingered in the air. Yet there was no storm, no dark clouds above, just the restless pulse of the land itself. They climbed higher, the rocky cliffs rising on either side of them. The sound of their hooves was muffled now, swallowed by the earth beneath them. The path grew narrower and the night deepened, the stars above swallowed by the thick blanket of clouds. "Mara," Colt said again, his voice trembling with more than just fear. "What's happening?" The older mare glanced back at him, her expression unreadable. "Something is coming. Something that cannot be avoided. The earth trembles because it is about to change." Colt didn't understand, but he could feel it. The ground beneath his hooves was alive in a way he had never felt before. It wasn't just the shifting of dirt or stone, it was something deeper, something ancient. A presence. A warning. He felt it in his bones, a sensation that made his heart race and his muscles tighten with an unknown fear. The herd moved as one, a single unit, a family forged by hardship and shared survival. Colt, now more than just a foal, felt the pull of this unity deep within him. They weren't just running from danger, they were running toward something. Something that demanded their strength, their resilience. As they reached the top of the ridge, Mara stopped. The herd halted behind her, and for the first time, Colt saw her eyes reflect not fear but resolve. She turned to face them, her head held high. "Listen to me, all of you," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a sharp wind. "We are stronger than we know. We are bound by more than blood. When the earth trembles, when the storm comes, it is not the end. It is the beginning." Her words sank deep into Colt's heart. He didn't understand all of it, but he could feel the truth in her voice, the certainty that echoed in his chest. They were not alone. They had each other. And together they would face whatever the earth had in store. The sky split open with a crack of thunder that sent a shiver down Colt's spine. The sound was deafening, an explosion of noise that seemed to shake the very air. The ground beneath them trembled again, this time harder, more violent. Rocks tumbled from the cliffside, and the herd shifted uneasily. But Mara remained calm, her steady gaze unwavering as she looked out over the valley below. "It's time," she repeated, her voice low but resolute. "We rise together." The first rumble of the earth came again, louder this time, and the horses shifted into motion. They moved as one, bound by a shared instinct, a collective will to survive. Colt's heart pounded in his chest, the rhythm of his hooves matching the beat of the earth beneath him. They ran faster than they ever had before, racing against the earth's fury. The sky above was a chaos of swirling clouds and flashing lightning. The wind howled, biting at their coats as they charged forward, their bodies moving in perfect harmony. They were more than just a herd now. They were a family. And in this moment, with the earth shaking beneath their feet, they knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. The ground rumbled again, a deep, throbbing pulse that seemed to come from the very heart of the earth. But Colt didn't flinch. He felt the strength of the others beside him, their presence grounding him, reminding him that he wasn't alone. The fear that had gripped him since the first tremor began to fade, replaced by a surge of something else. Something powerful, something unstoppable. He was no longer the lost Colt, wandering the canyon alone. He was part of something greater, something that would not break, no matter how hard the earth trembled beneath them. As the storm broke above them and the ground continued to shake, Colt ran alongside Mara, alongside the herd. And for the first time he understood. When the earth trembles, families rise.